we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. I'm your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast for any reason, you can always hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast on Instagram or Twitter. You can always check us out as well on our Patreon, patreon.com/BigmarkPod. If you ever wanted to donate to the pod, there's a few different tiers there, which I will be soon kind of updating things there. So stay tuned on the Patreon front. Good news for everyone there for sure. And again, thanks so much for being here. I always like to thank new and old guests for joining us here today. It's always my pleasure, doing this for everyone. I really appreciate you taking your time to be here with me now, then, later, whenever you're listening. I was talking to my buddy Nick the other day, and I was like, "Oh, I should start a new phrase when I get into the podcast." So, sit down, and let me take you on a journey to the center of the mind. We're going to talk about something a little bit more philosophical today. Something kind of interesting that, in fact, another friend of mine from work, Chris, my buddy Chris Watterson out there, shout out C-Dubs. We were talking about this exact topic, and I kind of delved into it a little bit more, so thought I'd throw it out there because it's pretty interesting, and have to admit a little bit deeper than we've gone recently, and I'm excited here on the Bigmark podcast. Anyway, we've been keeping it nice, we've been keeping it interesting, but this is gonna be a good one. It's called, we're going to talk about the contingency argument today. It's essentially an argument for the existence of God. But to get into things a little bit more, just philosophy wise, there's a couple terms we should probably kind of go over, just to make sure we're on the same page. Contingent versus necessary. So in philosophy, these terms, contingent versus necessary, are exhaustive categories. So it's literally one or the other. When you're talking about things, the chairs, people, experiences, happenings, things that you think about. It's hard not to seem like derivative or deconstructive, but like it's talking about things. Things can either be contingent or necessary. If something is contingently true, it could have failed to be true. So a contingent or contingency, something that is contingent, is just that. It's contingent on existing. It has something has to happen before it to exist, right? Again, this sweater is yellow, but it could be something. It could have been red. It could have not been a sweater. It's contingent on somebody choosing to be like, all right, Michael Jordan choosing to say, all right, I'm going to make a yellow sweater. So the reason this exists is contingent, again, on something. But if something is necessarily true versus contingently true, so something is necessarily true, it couldn't have failed to be true. So it's going to be true. It can also be necessarily false, or in that case, impossible, the opposite. But when something is necessary and is in that case, it is always that. It will always be that. I guess it's hard to say, because essentially that's what brings us to our argument here. Because you kind of go, okay, well then what is necessary, right? And this is what kind of brings us to this. So before we go right into the argument, another aside here, you can't use a contingent to explain a contingent. So like a room full of apples, you can't say, oh, like, all right, why is this room full of apples? Is because you can't say because the room is full of apples, right? Like, why is there God? Because there is God. You can't just say that. And we are contingencies. Humans are contingencies. We could not exist, right? Like there's a chance that we could not be here, right? So again, there's very few things that I guess are necessary. So the contingency argument itself, also known as the cosmological argument, it kind of breaks down into a few different things here. So again, you have to think about it like this. Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, right? There's a reason why something is here, basically. If the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explains that there's something that created the universe, i.e. God. The universe obviously clearly exists. We can look around, we can see that the universe exists, at least in we're perceiving something, even if it's a fucking simulation, which in fact only solidifies this argument. But like, whatever reality is, it exists. Therefore, the universe has an explanation of its existence. Therefore, the explanation of the universe existence is God. That's it. And like, it's kind of fucking, it's pretty convincing, right? Like, I mean, when I really think about it, I've definitely had experiences in life. Grew up Roman Catholic and raised with that kind of like really domineering, like idea of religion through school and such. And, God, I kind of knew, I had always this inherent feeling that God wasn't this like person, dude, man with a big long beard, essentially in the sky, at least invisible, even if he didn't have like that, which is even harder to personify someone like that. But it was always like really hard for me to believe at any point really that there's like actually a God like that like at least Roman Catholics believe in, right? Like that's this person that's up there that is omnipotent. He knows everything that's going on. He chooses the way you're going to be. You're made in his image. Anything that ever happens to you is his doing, good or bad. So, okay. Yay. We have, life and nature and wonderful things. We also have like fucking cancer and tsunamis that kill people and, crazy death. And like, we have to like kill other things in life to also, so again, if God is omnipotent, he is not wholly good. Like, I was raised with Catholic. God is wholly good and wholly omnipotent, but you can't have both because there are bad things in the world. And yeah, there's Satan or whatever. But again, even in Catholicism, at least in Christianity, God created like everything, and Lucifer is just like a fallen angel. And again, it's very confusing. But I've again had other experiences, whether it's through psychedelia or just living in life and experiencing love and experiencing beautiful scenes in nature and art and things like that. There's some channel up there, and I've spoken to it before, the collective unconscious, whatever that is. I think myself anyway, I believe that like we are all God, in the sense that like we our consciousness, that collective consciousness, whatever that might be, is that because we are kind of essentially creating the universe in some senses, right? Again, like we'll set aside simulation theory for now, but like, again, if there's an observer effect to the universe or things like that, or whatever that might be, wherever this wealth, like when I say I've observed art, whether it's creating it myself or seeing it in a museum or hearing it about in documentaries, you hear about artists that can channel their art and they go into it, or they either go into a trance or, Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan and guitar players, but I'm sure other artists as well speak about this unseen, unknown world that somehow they're open to. And again, most of the time you're accessing it, it's not through like, okay, I'm going to tap into this world right now. It's your body is a channel, and you're open to it. And in fact, you're not thinking. I might have said this before on the podcast, but one of our producers once told us, if you're thinking, you're stinking. When you're playing music, if you're thinking too much, you're not going to be sounding really good. So practice is important. So then when you do come to the studio or you're playing live, those moments come naturally, and you can allow that creativity to flow through you. So again, where does that creativity come from, right? And that's the idea in some senses of the contingency argument, is that, another way you can, another name for the contingency argument is the prime mover idea, or so that at some point someone had to, like, if we just keep tracing back, whether it's the Big Bang or whatever, you just follow all the energy back to a certain point. Like if it is the Big Bang, which is being questioned heavily, but pretty much accepted by mainstream science, there had to be something that started that bang, right? Or like a big crunch is what they think is happened. But whatever it is, at some point you can follow it back and keep going to the beginning of bloody time. Someone had to flick the pendulum to start it moving. That's essentially the idea, right? And a can, like, or take the idea of a cannonball or a cannon, right? Shoots a cannonball, and you can tell where the cannonball is in space, and you can trace the back in time logically that where that cannon flew and where it's heading and where it went, from where it went all the way back to the cannon. And you can infinitely splice that time, right? You can go from point A to B, and then in between point A and B, you can split that in between, you can split that, and you can keep splitting that distance in between. And essentially at some point, again, leads back to that there has to be like a cannon firing the cannonball at some point. There's also another idea with that reminds me of something I learned in school, that like essentially nothing actually moves in the universe because of that idea. Like you can have like if you want to go from point A to B, you have to go from point A to, if you want to go from point A to B, you first have to go point A to C, but then you have to first go A to D first, and then you can infinitely segment that space. You can keep shortening it to essentially nothing actually moves. It's a weird philosophical thing. I can't even remember what class I would have even heard that in, but might have even been in high school, for God's sakes. But that's what that reminds me of. But anyway, regardless, you can keep tracing things back, and essentially that because you're infinitely tracing it back, it proves that God exists. Right? So again, God, G-O-D, whatever you want to say, might be a different thing, right? God, themselves, himself, herself, whatever, ourself. Even Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you. But the idea that, again, there must have been somewhere where this kind of sprouted from, right? And it's a pretty compelling argument, and me and my buddy Chris were talking about it a little bit, and I looked into the video that he mentioned about it, and it's really interesting. It's I should shout out the boys in the video here. Let me just look it up, but it's a video that like kind of like essentially looks at all the different arguments for God. I didn't watch the entire thing because it's like over an hour, but I did watch. So Alex O'Connor is the guy who actually did the video, and he has it. Him and Joe is the other guy. Sorry, what's Joe's channel here? Majesty of Reason. So that's the kind of the co-host, if you will, or the guest on Alex O'Connor and the arguments for God's existence tier list. So again, he does kind of like a ranking, and right off the bat, they talk about the contingency argument. They put that at like S tier right away, top tier argument for God, right? Like it's hard to even refute. It's hard to even tease apart too much, right? Because that's the idea that there's the grand watchmaker, that we're looking at this extremely complex thing that is the universe. Like it's an extremely intricate watch, that there has to be a watchmaker out there that actually, eventually chose to put out all these pieces together and things. It's not just like pure chaos and pure just like complete random chance that we're all here, right? And the problem with that whole idea, though, is that I feel like that really looks into this other part of human nature, right? Is that we go, this can't just be by accident. We can't just be here by random chance. All of our loved ones and all the things that we enjoy can't just be here for no reason. And when all of our feelings and all of our emotions can't just be the results of chemicals in our brain interacting with each other and then our reactions to our environment. No way, it can't be that. But a lot of mainstream scientists look at it that way, right? And you can break it down like that, and you can logically look at that, and you can predict a lot of things, right? Like look at how Western science and Western medicine is basically based on all those principles. It's a monistic approach, mind and body are one thing. There's no difference. Everything that you are and that are results of chemical processes in your body and brain. That's it. That doesn't sound like there's no fucking juice to that, right? Like it's tough, unfortunately. It's not to say that it's wrong, but there's something feels like is missing with that whole argument, right? And again, like I've mentioned, I believe that there's some higher power. If I ever became a Mason and they asked me, do you believe in a higher power? I can say yes. It's not going to be your traditional kind of idea, but there's got to be something going on, right? And whether that's several forces, who knows? Because that's the other thing is you can bring up the same argument that I had, when I started questioning growing up Catholic. If God is so omnipotent, if God is everywhere and can do everything, why does he allow bad things to happen? Why does he punish you for things that he made you do? Because he created you. So what's that about? But then there's the idea that are there evil forces out there, right? Does that explain things, right? And if there is this higher power, and is it omnipotent, right? Maybe not, right? The God that I'm saying, that might be us, that might be our collective unconscious. Again, I can't say for sure. Maybe that God isn't omnipotent. Maybe that God isn't untouchable. Maybe there is corruptible potentially in some senses, right? But also, what is good and evil? It really does. It really does take us down this road. What is good and evil? Is that all objective, or is that all subjective? Right? Do we just create that because, again, it gives us a narrative. It gives us an explanation there of why bad things happen. But if we are God trying to experience ourselves, right? If each one of us is just, we're choosing to inhabit this human form in this 3D reality. If we're choosing to do that, then every experience that exists is good, is inherent, is just what it is. It's not even good or bad. It exists. And when we live our lives in terms of good and bad, right, we superimpose these ideas on this reality that in some senses, not to sound cold, cares not for what the fuck you think, right? yeah, it's wonderful to be able to surround yourself with like-minded people who most of the time are going to be predictable in their behaviors, and it's much more comforting and very safe. And when we were humans, hundreds of thousands of years ago in smaller tribes, it was a lot easier to kind of be like, okay, we're all in this together. But then when we started, again, growing past that, but again, having these ideas of, no, this is how I want to do it, this is how it should be done, it gets difficult. This is where that plane of spiritual and reality do cross, because you got to live your life. You really do. I love the journey into the mind, meditation, spirituality, everything. And if you can integrate that into your life, all the better. If you can lead with love, and if you can make decisions with love in your life, that's awesome. But you still got to pay the bills. You still got to put the lights on. So there are times where you got to be like, all right, let's be responsible. It doesn't mean you have to be fucking serious and stern and hate life and be hateful and aggressive and mean and violent. It's just like, hey, you got to fucking get your hair cut. You got to trim your nails. You got to take care of yourself. Hey, you got to wash your house. You got to wash your house. You got to clean your house. You got to wash your car. You got to put gas in the fucking car to get to work, to do your thing. And yes, why do we have to work? Why is there money? Why is there all those things? I don't know. I'm not sure. Yes, there's probably a lot of jobs out there that are kind of like superfluous to human existence. They don't need to necessarily be there. But there are a lot of things that need to be there. We need infrastructure. We need food. We need, entertainment. We need a lot of things that are like really essential to human existence. And basically, you can kind of break it down into those few categories, and every business on planet Earth revolves around those few things. Again, food, housing, entertainment, and like comfort, like whatever that is, like I guess like pleasure, right? So those like basic needs, the hierarchy of needs kind of thing, everything surrounds that. So whether it's education, which is just making you smarter to then like get those things, to make those things better. Medicine, I guess that's one of them too, like health, medicine, like keeping you health. So gyms and like, physiotherapists and all that stuff. So like, again, you can kind of look at that. It all branches into into these like basic needs. So we need to work. It's the economy and the crazy money fucking shit that has really messed with everything, right? That's really just like corrupted things. And, again, who knows how much better it was when we were on the gold standard or whatever that is. And I don't want to talk out the side of my mouth because I don't really know too much about this kind of stuff. But again, at one point our currency, our economy was based on the gold standard, in the sense that like money, a dollar was worth like a certain amount of gold, and there was that amount of gold existed in a bank somewhere in a vault, and it was just represented by that paper dollar or whatever note. $5 would never, no, it represented the gold that you had in your bank. And that moved around, there's whatever. But again, when they started going away from that, and then tying the dollars to other things, to goods and petroleum, like to petroleum, or to like the stock market in essence, and things move up and down. That really changed kind of the way things work, right? And again, you can look at all those needs that I just talked about. You can look at, there are maybe some people that exploit some of those needs, right? Look at the renting crisis right now. Look at the financial crisis in general. There's a lot of people that got really fucking greedy that got us into this point. And it sure as shit ain't fair, but it's happening. And maybe that's what happens when you have full free market capitalism too, right? So there's a lot of ways to do it. But generally speaking, when we moved away and got into this position, things started to get manipulated anyway. And, there's always been class economies and stuff. But again, this whole conversation can get extremely tangential. You can go very, very deep because obviously we're talking about essentially the nature of reality and the nature of existence. But to get back to the contingency argument, again, there's not a lot of places to poke holes in it. I'm trying to poke holes in it as much as I can. One of it, essentially is saying that is God a necessary is God necessarily true? Is God a necessity? I guess you could call it that. If you call someone a contingency. Nah, I guess is God necessarily true? That's the thing. We don't know that, right? But what this contingency theory is saying is that, again, something has to precede the contingency at some point. And if the universe itself is contingent on something, that something has to be God. It's pretty tough, folks. So maybe it's us. Again, Jesus said it himself. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So if I'm you and you are me, how can there ever be wars again? That's what Bill Hicks used to say. If we all realized that each one of us was part of this collective unconscious and God experiencing each other, and we're all just projections and mirrors of each other going through this existence and doing this, there'd be no wars. There'd be no reason to fucking kill each other. We could ascend to who knows what kind of reality, who knows what kind of existence, when we can all realize hey, we're in this 3D reality, maybe for something else, maybe not to just fucking toil away the hours and just work and work to feed these needs. Maybe we can find a better way to satisfy these needs that doesn't take away from each other. And the people that, people that live, it's hard to say. We don't want to get into Brave New World territory. We don't want to get into 1984 territory. Where do we go? Who knows? We're going to utopia. We're going to dystopia. Only time will tell. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for listening. Check out the Patreon. Hit us up, DMs, Instagram, Twitter, Bigmark Pod, Bigmark Podcast. Love y'all. Take it easy. Peace. Peace.